carry me back to old Virginia. Carry me back to old Virginia.
Memorials are remembrances. Some of them are exciting, inspiring, and patriotic, while others are reverential, sobering, and somber. Together, they've served these purposes for generations. Together, though individual, they work. It takes celebratory and uncelebratory, heralded and unheralded. For without both, the full aspect of human tragedy and triumph that is history can neither be taught nor learned. It's for this reason that the United States has memorials commemorating Pearl Harbor as well as Iwo Jima, 9/11, and the Yorktown Victory Monument. We've never been a nation to shy away from victory or tragedy. We've always learned from it and used it to make us stronger. Whether or not you like the rallying cries, remember the Alamo, remember the Maine, remember the Lusitania, remember Pearl Harbor, remember 9/11, remember, remember, remember. Ecclesiastes 7:2-4 poignantly drives this point home. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting, for that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. The wise remember. That's how they learn. That's how they make their hearts better. They enjoy happy memorials, but they also enjoy learning from less than happy, somber, even painful moments. They rejoice in sorrow, not because of some sadistic pleasure. No. They rejoice in sorrow because they've learned how not to repeat those failures that lead to pain. They rejoice in that they can enjoy victorious moments much more as they understand how far they've come from that somber time. They remember. It helps them. If we are to be wise, we are to remember. We're to remember both the good times and the bad times. Don't shy away from them. We need to learn from men like John Smith, who took his adventurous spirit across the Atlantic in order to help establish a new colony, a new way of life. His monument at Jamestown is a testament not to success, but perseverance. He persevered through tyranny, war, disease, famine, and infighting to birth a new way of life. Pocahontas also has a monument at Jamestown, as well as other locations throughout Virginia. She dared to save John Smith's life when, as a 10-year-old girl, she flung herself on top of that strange Englishman who challenged her father's authority. Pocahontas saw a new way of life, one that offered different, potentially more advanced opportunities than what she had previously known. She wanted that, not only for herself, but also for her people as well. Pocahontas then went on to courageously marry an Englishman who almost lost his life on a 1609 journey across the Atlantic. For you see, he and his first wife survived a hurricane, 10 months on Bermuda, a year of mismanagement in which his wife and newborn child died. But John Rolfe remembered the stolid English domestic economy and pressed on. Rolfe returned to England for a short time, witnessed Pocahontas' deterioration and death while there. But he remembered what could lie before him in Virginia. He returned and pushed through the sorrow and heartache that plagued his life, and through hard toil he made Virginia successful. The early settlers remembered Rolfe's success, but they also remembered his travail and sorrow. They knew that if he could succeed, so too could they. Their farms, homes, and plantations remain a worthy testimony to not only the unshackling of bad economic and political policy, but also the triumph of free choice and private property. Those same settlers' children were not allowed to forget the past hardships that they had endured. Instead, those hardships were used to teach noble ideals, such as hard work, strong family bonds, respect for others, the value of liberty, freedom of choice, sound business sense, and entrepreneurial ingenuity, just to name a few. As a result, a new world-beating generation who challenged tyranny sprang out of Virginia. Because the past in all of its harsh glory was remembered, this new generation understood the difficult task ahead. But they knew that undertaking the difficult journey away from England's firm grip would benefit future generations in unimaginable ways. Those men and women from that time are memorialized not because of the good times, but because some submitted to, endured, or overcame the bad. They spent many nights in frigid temperatures not knowing where a next meal would come from, let alone if there ever would be a next meal. They saw their homes pillaged, farms destroyed, finances disappear, and loved ones die. But they learned from their past Virginians. They knew that freedom brings prosperity. They knew that if they remained steadfast in adversity, then the possibility of a better life, maybe not for them, but for their children, could be obtained. They remembered. The founders' children and grandchildren built upon their memory. They could praise God for the happy times that came, especially as they knew those times to be truly happy compared to the truly sorrowful tales from the Revolutionary era. Those subsequent generations did not have to endure tyranny in the same manner as their elder loved ones did. But they never forgot what it felt like, what it sounded like, what it tasted like. That's why when newly tyrannical obstacles arose, those impediments were easy to spot. This newer generation understood the cost of the fight, but they also knew the taste of a world without tyranny. They knew because they were taught to remember, so they fought. Many of those men fought against tyranny, while some fought to continue an institutionalized form of oppression, slavery. When that fight was over, a young teacher from Petersburg, Virginia, led her class into Blandford Cemetery, where Virginians who had lost their lives during the Petersburg Campaign, as well as 5 other American wars, were buried. Nora Fontaine Maury Davidson and her students began laying flowers on the graves of young Virginians who fought in the conflict many have since called the Civil War. She wanted to remember. She wanted her students to remember. Their actions that day warmed the heart of Union General John A. Logan's wife, Mary, who was so touched by what she had witnessed that upon her arrival back in Washington, D.C., she couldn't contain her awe. The story she retold to her husband, John, so moved him that he established a broader, nationwide remembrance of the fallen. His Grand Army of the Republic, an organization formed to commemorate the Union soldiers who died during the war, established what was originally known as Decoration Day. Congress would later take on that tradition and renamed it Memorial Day in 1882. Both sides suffered loss in 1865, but their memorials remained. Why? Because both sides of the fight understood the importance of learning from the past. They knew that the question of their enduring legacies would be questioned by future generations. Otherwise, no one would learn. No one could be wise to understand the times without remembrance. Those who survived the conflict wanted their children to learn from what they had experienced. They wanted their children to learn from both the good as well as the bad. Because for them, the most offensive thing would be to blindly surrender the freedom that had been so dearly won. Ignorance was their most hated enemy. Memorial Day now includes a remembrance of those who have fallen in that fight for liberty in the far-flung reaches of Corregidor, Anzio, Chateau-Thierry, Vietnam, Korea, and Mosul. Along that historic journey, stories of valor, stories of tragedy, stories of lives won, and stories of lives lost have filled countless imaginations. We remember their courage, their fight. So on this Memorial Day, on every day, learn from history. Learn that mankind has done some wicked things. Don't shy away from that. Embrace it. Not in a haughty manner. Embrace it in the way that Solomon penned, and make your heart better. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. remember. Thank you for joining me for this special edition of the Virginia History Podcast. As always, please check out the website at vahistorypodcast.com. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast provider. And join us next time as we resume our narrative walk through Virginia history.
Mas tudo bate despedido dos embazes.